Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hunt Club podcast. We have another Cyber Minds show today, or episode on the show today. And today we're joined by Owen once again from the MDR team. And today he's going to be talking about AI-powered cyber attacks. Owen, you want to just say hello to everyone again?
Hi, everyone, again.
Um, if you haven't caught the other episode that I did with Owen, he talks about really awesome things like threat trends and whatnot. So just take a look at that if you haven't already. All right, so cyber powered sorry, AI powered cyber attacks. Let's talk about this. Why are attackers using AI, Owen?
Yeah, so the main reason why we're seeing this at the moment is generally a lot of these tools are quite in their infancy, so their actual power at the moment isn't huge. But one of the main things it's giving people the opportunity to do is it's making conducting attacks easier and requires a less barrier to entry. So you're seeing more and more attackers and more adversaries that maybe potentially wouldn't have the knowledge or skill set to carry out these attacks in the past, with the likes of AI as a service tool or prompt generation malware. These people are getting much easier access to the type of skills that previously would have taken years to develop their trade.
Yeah, I see. Can you speak about how, for example, an attacker would use Warm GPT or Evil Proxy to carry out an attack?
Yeah, so AI as a service tools like Worm GTP or Fraud GPT. So these are essentially like LLM tools. If you think, we all use ChatGPT or
Right.
Gemini or any of these kind of tools nowadays. These are essentially malicious actors versions of those type of tools. Whereas
Mm.
if you use ChatGPT and you prompt it to generate malware for you or generate a phishing email for you or any of these type of things, it's going to be caught by, content restrictions or filters that those companies have in place to prevent misuse like that. Whereas these
Mm.
tools are actually developed strictly for that purpose, and so they're very very good. And we're the type of tools that like LLMs work is when they're hyper focused on a particular task and trained on data for a particular task. It means they
Mm.
perform
Mhm.
much better than a more general tool on the normal market. And the life of evil proxy or tycoon 2FA. These are more general phishing kits that we've seen for years. The kits themselves aren't new, but what's new about them is some of these tools are now implementing, AI chatbots where previously you did require some, web development knowledge or knowledge of how
Mm.
kind of designing websites when you're copying these type of phishing portals. But now these type of tools are building in AI chatbots where you might not have technical skills. Well, you can just chat to an AI chatbot while you're setting up your phishing website, and it'll walk you through the process.
That's honestly so interesting to think that as we are, using AI to increase our productivity and help with our daily work, attackers are doing the exact same thing, but obviously for malicious reasons. So I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Okay. So how are they using AI? You kind of touched on this, but I just wanted to understand a little bit more here.
Yeah, so we're kind of seeing three key areas here where they're trying to use AI to help in their attack. So the first one here is using AI to kind of study their target's behavior and to blend in
Mm.
with normal activity. And this kind of can happen at a few stages, right? So this can happen before they've actually conducted the attack and
Hmm.
they're just doing their reconnaissance, on the open web, social media, LinkedIn, they're just trying to get an understanding of who to target. Um, and where they might use this is they'll use AI to, analyze, LinkedIn, social media feeds, company
Hmm.
history, maybe open financial statements and say,
Hmm.
okay, which company is more likely to pay us if we, do breach them? And, who potentially is at more risk here if we threaten to say exfiltrate data or post it publicly, like financial institutions or some sort of industry where there's even more of a threat there if a threat actor was to release sensitive information. We see a rise in things like double extortion where they threaten to not only release your data, but they also threaten to report you to the authorities for having a breach in the first place.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. Mhm.
As well as this, then we're seeing attackers modify attack patterns on the fly to avoid kind of the more traditional detection rules in like
Mm.
SIM or even some EDRs where you have kind of signature-based detections. And essentially, what's happening here is we're seeing some evidence of what's called polymorphic malware. And essentially, what this is malware that can speak to an AI in real time and then rewrite itself. as it goes to avoid
Oh.
detection or potentially to change a way it does something to carry out a particular task that may not work. Whereas previously, if an attacker drops a malware payload on a host, it's wrote to do specific tasks and either worked or doesn't. Whereas now, what can happen is, say, for example, a piece of malware is trying to exfiltrate data, to a C2 server over HTTP, and it's not working. Well, previously, then it just would have stopped there. Whereas now,
Mhm.
with polymorphic malware, it could potentially change that to then say, okay, I'm going to try a DNS tunnel instead and see if that will let me exfiltrate the data. As well as that, then we're seeing it mimic legitimate admin or user behavior and kind of abusing that once they're inside. So what this kind of looks like is there's a phrase you'll hear a lot in the industry called living off the land, where attackers a few years ago moved
Mhm.
from, say, using their own tools for everything and instead decided it'd be best if they actually just used inherent native processes or tools that are on Windows or Linux systems, and essentially helps them avoid detection because you're using tools that are expected to be used in the environment already. And this kind of goes one step further and potentially, analyzes things such as like login patterns or tool sequence activity,
Oh.
and kind of
Mhm.
builds on that what we've seen live off the land activity, and makes it even harder to detect as abnormal because you're potentially running these tools on an admin account at times and in such a way that the admin has done it in the past, and so it looks even more likely that this is admin activity.
Mhm. That's so interesting. So it's just like a different way of saying like their costumes, their disguises just get better and better
Yeah.
essentially with AI. That's incredible. Okay. So what does this mean for modern attacks? What does this mean for modern security teams here?
Yeah, so what this essentially means is, kind of what the headline says here is what took attackers, weeks or months of reconnaissance, initial access, moving through the
Hmm.
network, getting all to the end stage of exfiltration. That can be achieved in minutes in some reported cases. The likes of Microsoft have reported in the last year the number of trackers that they're tracking jumped from 300 to over 1,500 in 1 year.
Oh.
The amount of attacks a second they're seeing, jump from 579 to over 7,000. So we're seeing that, the amount of attacks, just in terms of volume and the amount of sophisticated trackers out there, is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what's happened here, that low barrier to entry that I talked about. And
Right.
then, as well as that, if you think it's lowering the barrier for entry for people that may not have the skill set, what can these tools do for people that had the skill set initially, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Kind of like, you might see in, a software engineering environment where people talk about AI and how, that might hurt junior level engineers, but you also have to think about how AI can complement the more senior engineers that already know what they're
Hmm.
doing, and it just helps them get quicker and quicker as someone that already has these skills. Um, as well as that, we talked about kind of polymorphic malware there to kind of generate itself on the fly, and just kind of the overall scale is probably the main thing here. Just the amount of attacks that, even if they're not successful, they might be bogging down
Right.
security teams to the point that, you're generating stuff like alert fatigue and you're dealing with issues that then maybe a more traditional attack still might get through in that case, because security teams are, maybe potentially short staffed. They don't have the capability to deal with the high volume and increase in security detections in these more traditional tools. And that's causing issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is really big for security or so for organizations out there. It's just a call for better technology, a better like security program to catch these types of attacks here. You have an example of an AI-powered cyber attack, sort of like a comparison between traditional and one that's done with AI. Can you just walk us through that right now?
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is just kind of a side by side of an example of what a traditional attack might look like and what an AI powered attack utilizing tools and techniques we've just talked about may look like. So if you
Hmm.
look in the left hand side of the table here, you'll see the different stage of the attack, and then you'll see traditional versus AI. So for reconnaissance and enumeration, kind of like I talked about, picking your target, and then once your target's been picked, doing more recon about how potentially you might gain your initial access and target selection there, you're talking 1 to 7 days in a more traditional attack here. Whereas an AI powered attack, you're talking 30, maybe 35 minutes in some
Mm.
cases. So you can see already, from a week down to 30, 35 minutes is a serious, serious impact there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the time frame we're looking at here. You're also looking at, AI is probably going to generate a more sophisticated and more targeted approach compared to what someone may put together in 1 to 7 days themselves. Then when you're coming to, payload creation, delivery, and then actually conducting that exploit, you're going up to 15 days here in your traditional attack. Whereas in the AI powered attack here, we're still within that 1.5 hour time frame from initial attack to getting to this stage then. And then kind of when we get to moving laterally, exfiltrating data, and then monetizing that, be that, if you deploy ransomware, demand the ransom, you're talking upwards of 23 days from start to finish in a traditional attack. Whereas in the AI-powered attack, we're still within the first 24 hours of this window from start to finish. As well as that, we're also seeing some kind of, I want to say, interesting uses of AI in different stages of these attacks. We already talked about different ways AI may help with data exfiltration and initial access here, but it's particularly when it comes to ransomware and ransomware negotiations. There has been examples of groups like Conti using AI chatbots to handle ransomware negotiations for them, where the AI has access to that same information they use to pick their target. And essentially what it will do here is it will change the tone it's using. It will change the urgency. It will demand a different monetary value depending on the company it's speaking with, based on how the people are responding, right? If it can analyze the sentiment of how someone is typing and say, I think I can get more out of them. And it's kind of eliminating that personal factor where you'd need someone in the chat handling those negotiations. Now it's just AI. So it's just a matter of finding more companies to breach, to ransom, and AI will handle the rest for you essentially. So again, it's not just one stage of the attack we're seeing this. It's from start to finish. We're seeing different examples of AI having an impact on the threat landscape here.
Yeah, and I also want to highlight the fact that the difference between like 23 days versus within like 2 hours here, because in terms of tools and tooling and how we detect things and how not we but like just security tools in general, sometimes there's a lag, right, between like what actually happens and then oh sorry, when things actually happen and when the detection fires. So the fact that like they can move so quickly without potentially with that lag, that detection triggering lag, it just means that they can conduct that attack so quickly, so swiftly, and be successful in it. So it's huge, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think like as an organization, if you're listening to this, if you were to look at some of your metrics, like your organization's mean time to detect or mean time to
Yep.
respond,
Yep.
and then compare it to these timelines, maybe more traditionally, an organization may have gotten away with having a mean time to detect or respond in the days or maybe even the hours. But now when it's minutes, 2 hours instead of days, 2 weeks,
Exactly.
you really have to take a look at those metrics and realize that going forward, those metrics just won't stand up against these attacks.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about how these cyber attacks are getting more powerful and then just this urgency to really stop it. So let's actually talk about how to stop it here. So we have a couple bullets here, but can you walk us through each one, Owen?
Yeah. So thinking of what we just went through there and looking at from the other side, from the defender's point of view, just some kind of 4 key points here that I picked out just to kind of what I think is important going forward in this kind of threat landscape. So first is real-time threat detection. So say, for example, here at Vectra AI, we're doing continuous monitoring of network traffic and looking for kind of abnormal signatures there, or kind of analyzing behavior and seeing what stands out from the crowd here. And that's super important because with these AI powered attacks, while they're trying to blend in, they're still going to be conducting anomalous activity, especially before they learn that pattern to begin with. So
Right, yeah.
having that happen in real time and not waiting for logs to, hit a sim and then go through some sort of rule detection engine and then generate an alert, you're kind of
Yep.
seeing that in real time and you're getting ahead when those minutes and hours count. It's already there. I spoke a bit about alert fatigue and how, the scale and increase of amount of attacks could impact security teams just with the overall volume that it's causing. So that's where I think signal clarity is super important here. And, the bad guys use AI, so we should too, right? So not just in
Right.
our detections, but also helping with that triage and prioritization activity to kind of cut down on that noise. especially those kind of tier one tasks that when you're determining, say, a lot of these kind of noise, it's very important to kind of get clarity there. As well as that, these are kind of, I'm going to kind of put on these 2 points almost together. Having that stack integrate, your technology stack integration, and being cloud and identity aware, right? Because the threat surface isn't just on-prem anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. It's in the cloud, it's identity, it's all these things at once, and attackers are moving between them at leisure, essentially. When people think of lateral movement and moving within a network internally, you almost need to think about that as well, moving from the cloud to on-prem and vice versa. And that's where it's super important here to kind of have a full scale view of your environment and your whole tech stack that you have within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to, I think that's a story that Vectra really tells with the with the modern network, modern attack story. In that we need to tie all these things together, and using AI to tie those things together will just optimize it even more. Not to sound so pitchy about Vectra, but I think that Vectra is a really good example of how we take technology to stop attackers from using their own technology to further attacks, right? Yeah.
It's a fighting like with like, if you're dealing with an AI attack, well, it makes sense then to deal with it defensively using AI as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's all we have, Owen. Any last thoughts on AI powered attacks? I know that was kind of like oh, it's happening, kind of like daunting, but I just want to make sure that you fit in any last thoughts you have.
Yeah, kind of just to reiterate kind of just what I said, it might look very doom and gloom with the rise of these type of attacks, but there
Yeah.
is also AI solutions there that can counteract these
Mhm.
attacks and will grow while these attackers grow. It's just a matter of your organization keeping the pace with those solutions and
Mhm.
not relying on traditional security tooling when attackers aren't doing traditional attacking anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, you put it perfectly. All right, Owen, thank you so much for your time. If you haven't already, like, comment, or subscribe to our channel. We have a bunch of awesome talks with awesome people like Owen. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Owen, and we'll see you next time. All right.
Thanks, Zoe. Bye,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.